Hello Animorphs fans and welcome back to the Animorphs Reviews YouTube channel. We're doing another one of these podcast watches today, and today is the Fandalite Academy, which was recommended by Nitro Indigo. Thank you very much for the recommendation, Nitro Indigo. I can't freaking speak. And we're going to watch their episode on number 4, The Message, which was a pretty good book, really good. If you like what you hear from Fandalite Academy today, I will leave a link to their page in the description. My purpose of being here is to essentially get drunk, because I rather enjoy getting drunk along with you other Animorphs fans, and this is a good way for me to do it. So, cool, and it gets people to listen to these other podcasts. This isn't technically a podcast, not technically. Right, so, drinking in fingers as per usual. 1 finger, 2 finger, 3 finger. Today, I'm drinking San Miguel, and the rules are as follows. Modern political issues, 2 fingers. Character traits, 1 finger. TV show criticism, 4 fingers. 90s reference, 3 fingers. Movie talk, 2 fingers. Aforementioned, 1 finger. Something wrong, 2 fingers. Naughty talk, 2 fingers. Podcast name, 1 finger. And anytime a cinnamon bun is mentioned, down your drinks. Those are the rules. Thank you for tuning in and watching. This is Fandalite Academy, The Message. Let's go.
To the Fandalite Academy.
Straight into our first finger podcast name. Good start, everyone. Oh yeah, if you didn't already get the point, drink.
Source for all the psychological and literary theory behind Animorphs that you neither wanted nor needed.
I like the sound of this.
Episode brought to you by The Gardens. Come meet mountain gorillas, crocodiles, dolphins, and the fastest healing tigers.
Was that a slip?
The Gardens.
This is Bug, back at you again with all of the psychological theory, and especially social psychological theory that I've managed to spot in Animorphs through reading the series too many times.
And this is Kate, who spends all of her time analyzing the implications of Animorphs within children's literature, which are a lot.
Right now we're going to be talking about Book 4, The Message. The one that opens up with that awkward little moment where Cassie turns into a squirrel without any assistance or supervision. It goes badly, as turning into prey animals always does. In this case, it specifically goes badly when Tobias nearly eats her alive. Wah, wah, awkward turtle. They discuss their dreams. They discover they've been having the same weird dreams. They end up going to the group as a whole and talking about how they've been dreaming about an Andalite trapped under the ocean. Marco briefly floats the idea of acting on his Mr. Rogers dreams, but ultimately they decide to act on Cassie's and Tobias's dreams instead and try and save the Andalite.
I have to say, Cassie and Tobias are the...
Technically a character trait for Marco, because they mentioned his jokes. They didn't say directly that he jokes a lot, but I'm going to count it. So that's 1 finger, drink.
Only ones that would possibly just naturally bring up their dreams in conversation. Aside from, oh, I had horrible nightmares last night. And if anybody else had been there, that conversation would not have happened. But you can totally see Tobias and Cassie just happening to sit around and sincerely discussing their dreams.
Also, Jake has dreams about Cryak for literally 20 books without mentioning this to anybody.
Fair point.
He knows that Cryak is a real higher power who is actually trying to kill him. So Kate's is right. If Jake had been the one to get the weird axe dreams, sorry Axe, you'd be screwed. Anyway, the kids decide to morph dolphins and try and find this Andalite kid. They get used to the dolphin morphs, discover they like the dolphin morphs, hitch a ride on a large ship of some kind, and eventually jump over the side of the ship into the water, swim around as dolphins. Obviously, they find the dome of the Andalite.
God, they're going through the plot quickly.
Our 6th Animorph waiting around inside. Axe morphs a shark. They all escape together. Jake comes within a half a millisecond.
Nah. Is this wrong, right? Is Axe the 6th Animorph? Because he's always... I know that he falls under the Animorphs thing from our perspective as fans of the series, but he's never considered an actual Animorph in the books, is he? It's controversial, so I'm not going to count it as something wrong. Go ahead.
See that he loves her just before they die. However, he is too socially awkward to tell her that even on his deathbed. Escape Visor 3. They all go home happy, where Axe acquires them all and becomes the most gorgeous quasi-combo human you could ever imagine.
I mean, let's be honest here. They're on their deathbeds like every damn book. So he could have made love confessions a whole bunch of times. And I know at this point it's not quite the life and death experiences or just blasé, but we're getting
To be fair,
Although I
were they
feel like
really a
Jake and
pair at
Cassie
that point?
are such adorable, socially awkward
Then again, they wouldn't
humans
need to be.
that they probably could have gone the entire war without saying the words if Rachel hadn't been there, kind of shoving them at each other and explaining that you actually have to use your words when talking to people.
I think there's also a very subtle difference in the way that Tobias conceptualizes liking Rachel and the way that Jake and Cassie conceptualize liking each other, which is that obviously with Tobias, it is not just physical, but he is very aware of Rachel's like physical appearance. Jake and Cassie, it seems to mostly be an emotional thing, that they have a really, really deep like and admiration of each other on an emotional level, and the physical is almost secondary. I just think it's interesting in terms of their development that early on, again, when they're still just out of their preteens, that Tobias seems to be a little more mature in that area than Jake and Cassie.
I also
like
want
this.
to mention that in terms of Jake and Cassie and physical appearances, the opening narration of this book contains my absolute favorite image of the entire series, which is Jake having taken a photo of Cassie in pooped upon overalls as she is shoving medicine down the throat of a resistant badger with an ugly little frown on her face as she says. He took this photo, he put it on his desk at home. Both of them are like, yeah, this is kind of who we are. We're maybe kind of dating each other, but we don't really acknowledge it.
I'm pretty sure it was a goose, not a badger.
I'm pretty sure
Yes.
it's a badger. My inner Hufflepuff
Oh.
rejoiced at the idea of the open acknowledgement that Cassie is all Hufflepuff. What I find
Cassie's always shoving pills in
is also
geese.
the book where
That's
Cassie
quite a-
actually straight
that's
up
quite
has
a meme
conversation with a
the
whale,
books.
and the whale talks back. Admittedly, it's not formally in, words, it's not out loud. She and the whale are kind of struggling to communicate with each other in a way that's pretty nonverbal. This is also maybe the most fantasy, the most ambiguous,
I'd agree with that.
and magical realism that the series ever becomes.
Yeah.
As Marco says, it's something like, oh, the talking bird wants to know if our lives have gotten weird because we're taking directions from a whale to try and find an alien under the ocean after we all turn into dolphins. This book gets a little weird.
I have to say, I personally hate that she sort of talks to a whale. I think that Cassie has a deep connection with animals, but it's mostly the fact that the whale actually provides information. Like, if it had just been Cassie saying she felt a bond, I think I would have been okay with that, but the whale providing any kind of concrete information, it just, to me, I don't know if it crosses too much into fantasy or if it's just
Plot
that
convenience.
This isn't something that comes up except with whales, which is a little weird, but this has been something that always bugged me. I really don't like that this is a thing.
Regardless of
Fair
Kate's,
enough.
I think, entirely valid thoughts on the subject, the fact remains that this series shows cetaceans as being ridiculously intelligent. Quick note, cetaceans, if I'm even saying that correctly, are whales, dolphins, orcas,
Porpoises?
I think so, yes. River dolphins, which are apparently a different thing from, like, ocean dolphins. So, large mammals that swim around in the ocean are cetaceans, which is important because it's shorter than saying whales and dolphins and orcas and stuff. This series actually plays with that idea a lot, that cetaceans are intelligent to the point where they have complex conversations and they can kind of convey information to one another in a way that verges on thought speak and is a little weird. I am with Kate on that one, but is an important part of the series. I'd also say that this isn't the only place where animal intelligence comes up. There are implications in...
Now, I just want to pause here, firstly to say, Christ, I'm never going to finish my drink. But these two, I read the description, I believe they're both PhDs, one in psychology and one in the study of children's literature, which is an awesome, perfect combination, really, for Animorphs. And I'm just listening to these two, I'm thinking, it's really, yeah, it does exactly what it says on the tin when it comes to the podcast description. And I'm listening, trying to gather what's going on, because they're obviously both very intelligent and they both know their fields and they're applying it to the series. And I'm fascinated. I just wanted to pause to say that. And because I paused, Medipilic, 2 fingers. I'll drink it with you. Me and you. 2 fingers. Drink.
I think book 28, that chimpanzees might be almost as intelligent as humans are. In book 36, they're all orcas, and they mention the orcas being unusually intelligent. So where I think this is not actually as far into the realm of fantasy as it first seems is that researchers have been looking at animal intelligence, and specifically animal intelligence in dolphins, because we have a fair number of captive dolphins, and looking at basically the origins of intelligence in dolphins as obviously these mammals who have complex social behavior. So when we talk about dolphins as social, I feel like this is another important distinction. There is basically social behavior and cultural behavior. Social behavior is several members of the same species working together to accomplish goals. If you remember, the kids have that battle where they're all dolphins and they all kind of work together to swarm the sharks and attack the sharks together. That's real dolphin behavior. Dolphins will plan out and execute attacks on
Just
sharks,
thought I'd play
and
the
they will
actual
defend
episode
members
from
of
the
their
TV
own
show in the
pod or
background.
their own group of dolphins in a way that indicates they really are very good at working together and they can communicate with each other. So that's social behavior. Cultural behavior is passing
Bloody hell, they're going in depth.
species, but between generations of the same species. And again, this is the psychology definition of social behavior versus cultural behavior. Cultural behavior is information being, again, passed down such that it remains after the death of the animal that first discovered that information. We have, for instance, complex math because Euclid was kind enough to write that information down. We inherited it over time. We
This is
have,
fascinating,
I don't
isn't it?
know, airplanes because Newton wrote down information about gravity, and then other researchers built on that information with information on aerodynamics, and then the Wright brothers built on that information, and etc. So that's cultural.
These
behavior.
two know their
Dolphins are
stuff.
definitely social.
You can't say they don't.
It kind of depends on who you ask, and it's a big debate in the field. Another place where there's signs that dolphins are actually quite intelligent and might be self-aware, so to speak, is researchers Rice and Marino. Marino has a very apropos last name. Put a bunch of dolphins in a tank with a mirror, and they let the dolphins play with the mirror, kind of get used to the mirror, and then they did a test of whether the dolphins could recognize themselves in the mirror. They put a little dot of red paint on each dolphin, and they let the dolphins swim by the mirrors again. The dolphins who had the little dots of red paint on them would actually stop and look at themselves and would examine their reflections, and would sometimes try to rub the red paint off by rubbing against the sides of the tank they were in. Why that's interesting. It's
bizarre, isn't it?
Behavior that's demonstrated by humans, by chimpanzees, by some adult orangutans, but not by very many other animals. So if you think about a cat in front of a mirror, we've all seen that on YouTube. You put the cat in front of the mirror, the cat sees its own reflection and assumes that the reflection is a different cat. Sometimes cats will attack the mirror, or they'll run away from the mirror, depending on how
This is
scaredy cat
fascinating.
they are. Pun intended. Point being, you have to understand that you
I
are
mean, I love animal
the
stuff,
rest
just
of the
learning
world
about
in order to
the
react
animal
that
world.
way to the presence of a mirror. Little
Sounds like they do
babies,
too.
if you put them in front of a mirror, will show some interest in a mirror, but if you put a red dot on their forehead, they will sometimes reach out and touch the reflection's red dot. They don't touch their own foreheads. If you put 2-year-olds or toddlers in front of a mirror and you put that little red dot on their foreheads, they'll reach up and they'll wipe off their own forehead. Are dolphins intelligent? And by extension, are whales intelligent? We don't know, but we know that dolphins show some signs of being able to distinguish their inner worlds from their outer worlds. We know
Fair.
that dolphins can
Cool.
talk to each other, even though it's not entirely clear how much it's just a matter of conveying stuff through tone and how much they might have rudimentary language.
That's something we've really
That's
got to
the
get to the
interesting
bottom
thing
of.
about whales. So nobody's ever done the mirror test.
But it's very
Whales,
difficult.
They're just basically too gosh darn large. But whales might show empathy. Specifically, a humpback whale was caught on camera protecting a seal from being eaten by orcas. Humpback whales don't eat seals. They don't have any kind of symbiotic relationship with seals. The only explanation for that behavior that seemed to make sense was that the whale was protecting the seal for the sake of protecting the seal. Is that evidence of whales having
Never heard of that.
empathy, or basically being able to engage in perspective taking with this poor seal who's about to be eaten by orcas? It's not clear. However, whales might actually be able to distinguish themselves from the world around them, put themselves in other cetaceans' shoes, so to speak, and they might be able to talk to each other.
I personally, this whole whales conveying information troubles me in the same way that Tobias and Jake communicating telepathically in the first book troubles me, because either way,
Well, that was just a
this idea that you can
KASU.
somehow organically pass a chunk of information from one brain to another without somehow translating it into your own ideas and words. It's just not something that comes up anywhere else in the series, and it's a very fantasy-esque thing to me because they're...
Now, we all, I'm pretty sure we all know that that was a KASU, Kilo Alpha Sierra uniform. I think that, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I believe that was acknowledged, I think even by the authors. I might be misremembering, but there were moments where things happened that were changed deliberately. And the fact that they're talking about it as if it wasn't a KASU, because I haven't been drinking very much, I'm going to count it as something wrong. And I'm going to change it from 2 fingers to 3, because why not? Let's do it. 3 fingers. Drink. Missing one. This is fascinating, honestly, to clearly very intelligent people who know what they're talking about and are delving far deeper than I would. It is fascinating. So let's carry on.
no good explanation for it.
Meanwhile, I think I agree with Kate's. I mean, so we get some hints at that with the Lyrans. We get some hints that Andalites might be able to convey more than mere speech with thought speak.
Yeah, that's weird. That's something I need to think about more.
They hinted that anytime Visor 3
Research
walks in a
more.
room and man just give off waves of, I am badass, look at me go. I think Kate's is right, that this is a very odd and kind of structure-breaking idea, even if it is one that is backed by some degree of scientific data.
What's interesting to me in this book is, well, several things, but first one, the fact that Tobias passes out when Axe sends out these messages, because it's assumed that he passes out because he's permanently stuck in morph. That ends up not being the reason why, and I am a sucker for some good foreshadowing.
Absolutely. I love this idea too, and the fact that it takes 19 books for them to get an explanation as to why Tobias passed out when Cassie did.
So one of my favorite concepts in the series, or one of the things that really fascinates me, is this idea of Jake, Rachel, Marco, and Cassie as sort of the core four, Tobias and Axe as outsiders. And there's a lot of very subtle moments where it's emphasized for us the fact that, Marco, Cassie, Rachel, Jake have normal lives, at least in comparison to Tobias and Axe. And moreover, that they have these deep familial and friendship bonds that go way beyond Animorphs. And by the end of the series, I think they achieved that with Axe and Tobias too. But point being, they start off the series with years of history between them. Tobias doesn't have that with anybody until Axe shows up. And even then, he doesn't truly understand what he has with Axe until 23. One of the reasons I love this tiny bit of foreshadowing.
They know their stuff.
That, Tobias
What can you say?
is going to get a family.
It's also striking how much the dynamic evolves after they've got Axe there, where before this, we kind of...
Forgive me for pausing it. I'm not pausing it for anything specifically they've said. So when I do these videos, I like to add commentary, because else it's just me playing their podcast. I'm struggling to... because I don't want to jump in and interrupt them. I don't. So I'm finding it difficult to, put myself in there and say things. They know more than I do on the topics they're talking about. Certainly regarding the stuff like the cetaceans. See, I'm just pausing it now to say, yeah, I'm trying to jump in. I want more forfeits so I can drink more. It's not happening. This is great, but not drinkable. It's got the drinkable rating low. I don't freaking know.
I get the sense that
that
Tobias
rhymes.
is primarily trying to be human, or is sort of living as a human who happens to live in a tree and eat squirrels. After Axe is there, we really see Tobias become more adapted to being a bird and have less concern with trying to be human-like. I think because Axe
Never thought of it like that.
also not
Nor have I really
and
noticed.
because he and Axe hang out and form their own little clique when the others are at school once Axe is there.
Going back,
Actually, let me think about this. They said the claim there was that when after Tobias Axe revealed himself to be related to Tobias, he became less intent on becoming human. So think about that. Was it 33? Which was the book where he found his... He was in the... No, I think it was 33, The Illusion. I hated that book. I think it was. Where Eric's caught smoking by Chapman. Yeah, it must have been, because it's certainly not 43, because I haven't read that one yet. Well, not in my reread. It's not 23, it's not 13. So it must be The Illusion, which is a crap book. But, yeah, trying to think. Was he thinking more about being human in that book, which would contradict what they said, which would mean that they said something wrong. No, because that was more Rachel, wasn't it? It's more Rachel trying to force him. Because she's crazy. She cray. So, no. Again, spot on. I'm trying to find reasons to drink, essentially.
the idea of sentience. That Tobias has a sentient companion that he can talk to pretty much as frequently as the other kids talk to each other or talk to their parents. And I think that's one of the worst parts about being trapped in Morph that we see some of in number 3, is that he's totally alone. And he has to set aside time or have the others set aside time in their schedules for him. And it just makes him feel awkward and, more like an outsider. So I think that's another reason Axe is important. But something else I love here with regards to how Tobias is on the outside. So Tobias has this relationship with Elfangor even before we know the complex history between them. They have this moment when Elfangor's dying that Tobias stays with him for a minute and holds his hand, and Tobias is more visibly affected than anybody else by Elfangor's death, feels this more immediate call that they have to do something because he was killed. I sort of feel if that had been any of the others, it would have been given a lot more significance than it was given because it's Tobias. Because A, they don't have any frame of reference for how he acts. Jake and Marco have
These two go in depth, man.
background. They all kind of...
They know their stuff.
Not trying to be cruel, except maybe Marco, but just...
And they're pulling it apart like I haven't yet. I'm learning stuff from this.
Social structure. They don't realize how significant it is that he forms this bond with this alien. And I think Jake even has a couple lines about how Tobias was just waiting for something to belong to, or Tobias was just looking for a reason to have friends, something like that. And so it's actually quite significant. I mean, we know why it's significant because they're father and son, but it's significant even before we know that Tobias and Elfangor bond, but it's sort of overlooked, I think, deliberately because the other kids just have different things to worry about, and frankly, everybody else's personal struggles early in the series are given more weight than Tobias's, not by the narration itself, but by the kids. And again, it's not something they're doing deliberately, but Cassie and Rachel, and then Jake and Marco each care deeply about their best friend. And then Cassie and Jake care about each other because they like each other. And Rachel and Jake care about each other because they're family. And so there's all these very complex, multi-layered, year-long
completely true.
bonds between them. And Tobias... And
I can't find any fault in what they're saying. In fact,
I think Bug is right.
they're exploring ways which I haven't explored.
because then it balances it out and it makes it so there's two of them who are outsiders and they can kind of be their own unit. And one subtle thing I love that we see later in the series is they are the ones that are most likely or quickest to express doubt that a plan will work. Not ethical doubt in the same way that Cassie does, or this is insane doubt in the way Marco does, but they're willing to make objective questions about Jake's decisions, especially in a way that the others aren't, because they aren't totally entrenched in the myth of Jake.
Now that I'm not so sure on.
It's also kind of striking to me.
Something to explore.
As Kate says, the structure will have completely reorganized itself by the time we get to the end of the series, where we see that, to some extent, by the time they're all living in the Hork-Bajir Valley, Marco and Tobias and Axe are certainly a clique of their own, and Jake and Rachel and Cassie are each in their own ways on the fringes. Jake has sort of ended up in a position where he spends a lot of time communicating with the adults and feels like his relationship with Marco has gotten pretty stilted. Cassie has that break with the team after what happens in book 50 that takes a while to heal. Rachel is frankly spiraling out of control in the last which is really striking.
I don't want to go too far into this because, yes, we'll talk about this when we get to the later books, but something that's hinted at here early in the series and then really comes to the fore later is the idea that you learn through hardship. Obviously, by the time we get to the 50s, they've all gone through so much crap. They've all been tortured. They've all killed. They've all almost been killed. They've lost, as we see from, kind of hints in the background of the books, they've lost friends and they've lost relationships with their families. They've lost their grade point averages, etc. But until 50 or 49,
Lost their grade point averages.
Jake, Cassie, and Rachel don't lose this sort of core family dynamic that they have. Marco, Axe, and Tobias all have, from the beginning of the series, had to deal with the loss of what a child was supposed to be able to count on, which is some sort of stability from their parents. So I think that's actually why the three of them thrive in a way that Cassie, Rachel, and Jake don't, is because they've already been coping with what the three of them suddenly have to cope with for the entire series.
This is fascinating. I can't jump in and say anything. I don't feel like I can.
The way that Cassie becomes much more aware of her own mortality, or her friend's mortality, in a way that she didn't up to this book. She goes to Marco and is like, if you don't want to do this, we won't do this. You could have died. And Marco, he doesn't quite say it like this, but you can tell he's thinking, bitch, we could have died like 20 times already. And you know, it was a bad idea. It's like he says, and he's not quite as harsh about it, but the reason she's so invested this time is because she's calling the shots. Marco, from the get-go.
Precisely. At first I thought they weren't hit, because I've got my own opinion about that, but then they turn it around, bang, nail on the head, because she cannot cope with calling the shots. And because they've been so correct throughout this episode, and I'm finding so little to drink to, I'm going to say cheers to Fandalite Academy. This is fascinating. I've enjoyed each podcast I've watched for their own reasons, but so far this is my favourite. They clearly know what they're talking about. They know the series in and out by the sound of it. Like, they've read it numerous times. I think they said at the start they did. At least Bug did. Was it Bug? I think it was Bug. But yeah, they know their stuff. They know what they're talking about, and it's a breath of fresh air to listen to. So let's all down our drinks as a thank you to Fandalite Academy. Bug and Kate's. Kate's? Is it Kate or Kate's? Kate's. Yeah, down your drinks to them. Cheers. That's that. Well, it's a good time to say. If you are enjoying their podcast, the link to their show will be in the description. They upload very infrequently. So they started uploading 3 years ago, and their last episode went up 11 months ago. I'd be very happy if they continued uploading. I'm not sure if they've actually just stopped or they're on a hiatus, or it's just that they're... It sounds like they do their freaking research, which probably takes us a while, so who knows? But yeah, fantastic stuff. Let's carry on.
Stands that this isn't a game and that truth, justice, and revenging your dead father that you didn't know was your dead father all sound great in the abstract, and then in the reality, when people are bleeding and dying and leaving loved ones behind, it's a heck of a lot worse than that. So I think that's a moment that it comes up here, this notion that Cassie, Jake, and Rachel are privileged in a way that Marco and Tobias aren't. But it's also interesting to Marco's character that he doesn't take the out, even before the events of 5, which, I won't get into that yet. But even before the events of 5, whether it's the fact that he feels the need to protect his friends or because he is a good person deep down underneath all of that cynicism, he's already invested in this mission in some way.
It's also kind of striking that Marco has very little patience for Cassie and Tobias, especially early on. Although to some extent he expresses some annoyance with all 4 of the others at this point. Their, relative degree of naivete. And I think Axe has a certain degree of experience with the world in a way that Marco does as well. In this book, kind of the moment that they meet Axe, they're like, "Hi, dude, your brother's dead." It's pretty brutal. Doesn't really handle meeting them very well. I think he tries to kill Cassie when Cassie mentions Visor 3 because he's clearly this lost kid who doesn't really know what he's doing. And saw weird aliens, shot them with a Draken beam, and...
Does he try to kill Cassie? Hold on a minute. Just give me a second to... Oh, I'll open my eyes. I was staring straight up. Do not move. I stunned you to see what you are, but if you move, I'll destroy you. I've seen images of your kind. Who was this, and like you say, was killed? I can't remember all of his name, but part of it was Prince Elfangor. The Andalite jerked as if he'd been hit. His entire body seemed to quiver. His deadly tail arched high in the air. Prince Elfangor? No. He died protecting us. The Andalite closed his main eyes for a brief moment. So... No, he didn't. Let's turn back a second or so.
Fumble his way out of it.
It's a shredder, not a Draken beam. Because it's the Andalites, right?
They're doing, and saw weird aliens, shot them with a Draken beam, and now he's trying to fumble his way out of it.
It's a shredder, not a Draken beam. Because it's the Andalites, right?
Thank you, you're correct.
Anyway, it's interesting. It reminds me of the whole, thing in Harry Potter where they say
a certain degree of experience with the world in a way that Marco
let's go back to it
as well. In this book, kind of the moment that they meet Axe.
I'm just trying to catch them saying something wrong. Because I'm determined now.
They're like, "Hi, dude, your brother's dead." It's pretty brutal. Axe doesn't really handle meeting them very well. I think he tries to kill Cassie when Cassie mentions Visor 3 because he's clearly this...
Oh, was it when he mentioned Visor... She mentioned Visor 3. Let's go back and try again. Suddenly, without warning, the Andalite's tail arched forward. The blade stopped centimetres from Marco's face. Ooh. Hold on a minute.
Lost kid who doesn't really know what he's doing and saw weird aliens, shot them with a Draken beam, and now he's trying to fumble his way out of it.
It's a shredder, not a Draken beam. Because it's the Andalites, right?
Thank you, you're correct.
Anyway, it's interesting. It reminds me of the whole, thing in Harry Potter where they say...
I've gone past it, haven't I?
He handle meeting them very well. I think he tries to kill Cassie when Cassie mentions Visor 3.
Oh, wrong! It was Marco. What the... Oh, Marco said, "Please tell me that's a real Andalite and not Visor 3. Suddenly, without warning, the Andalite's tail arched forward. Blade stopped centimetres from Marco's face. I've caught you out, Fandalite Academy. I've called you out. Wrong! You're wrong! I'm so proud of myself for spotting the one thing they've gotten wrong. That's credit to them. It might have just been a complete slip of the tongue, but whatever. I'm drinking to it, and so are you. Drink.
He's clearly this lost kid who doesn't really know what he's doing and saw weird aliens, shot them with a Draken beam, and now he's trying to fumble his way out of it.
It's a shredder, not a Draken beam. Because it's the Andalites, right?
Thank you, you're correct.
Anyway, it's interesting. It reminds
Saved
me
yourself
of
from another something wrong forfeit.
Harry Potter, where they say, he who shall not be named. And Dumbledore's like, guys, we should just call him Voldemort, because in not naming him, you're giving him power. But it makes sense because to all the kids, Voldemort is an abstract. He is literally a boogeyman in the closet. To Dumbledore, he is a very real person, and Dumbledore has the, I guess, experience that lets him understand that yes, this is a person, but to Harry, Ron, Hermione, etc., he is this
I don't really know Harry Potter, so I can't comment.
It
Could be wrong, I don't know.
And everything they do is directly or indirectly impacted by his existence. Same here with Axe, that the kids very quickly become terrified of Visor 3 and hate him too, but Axe, it's implied, has grown up in a society where Visor 3 is Voldemort. Especially the fact that he managed to take an Andalite body, that he's called the Abomination. So similar that he's given this epithet instead of his name sometimes. I think that's particularly interesting. I remember being a little kid reading.
It is very Harry Potter, isn't it?
Oh my god, he's so over the top. Like, he needs to calm down. Why is he...
It does make you wonder if one took influence from the other. Because, yeah, Visor 3 is often called the Abomination. And, I mean, I read, like, the first 3 Harry Potter books when they came out, and that was years ago. But, yeah, it was He Who Shall Not Be Named or something like that. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe it's just coincidence.
being so mean to Cassie because I was 7. But with the hindsight of age, I think it makes a lot more sense if you frame it that way. So one more thing I wanted to look at in this particular scene is this moment right after they tell Axe that Elfangor died. And so it says, "The Andalite closed his main eyes for a brief moment. My brother was a great warrior. His cousins loved him. His enemies feared him. No more can be said of any Andalite warrior. I was surprised by what Jake said next. I've lost a brother too. He's one of them, a controller." This moment is fascinating to me because Axe is reacting to the fact that his older brother died, and Jake's immediate association is his relationship with his brother. And that's fascinating because Tom's not dead. But in some way, even this early in the war, Jake has acknowledged the fact that he might not get Tom back. He is absolutely not thinking about it in like a conscious way, but the fact that he immediately empathizes with the guy who lost his older brother and feels this clear hole in his chest, in his life, where his brother used to be, the fact that Jake already conceptualizes Tom as lost is absolutely fascinating.
See, I never picked up on that. I never picked up on it.
That yes, like I said, on some subconscious level, Jake is already aware that after they couldn't save Tom in the first book, that was his one real shot, and he's not going to get another one. The other way to read it would be he truly sees Tom sort of like Orpheus and Eurydice, that Tom is sort of in this other place that's inaccessible, and that getting him back is going to be this absolutely monumental quest that basically is impossible. In the undertaking, he knows he might lose himself and he knows he might lose other people, but he can't not try.
I also love the very creepy, paranoia-inducing Invasion of the Body Snatchers-esque motif in the first book that they hint at here. They hint at again in the 6th book that Jake missed his older brother before he knew he was missing anything. He sort of sees it as Tom's had this weird thing that he's been acting odd lately. We see Jake's parents being like, "Man, you sure seem like you've been absent or distant lately." And it's this creepy idea of like, I don't know, the changeling myth where the real thing has been taken away and the replacement feels almost perfect but not quite.
It's very creepy, isn't it? Very, very creepy when you put it like that.
Even well before they're like, "Hey, that's not the real Tom, that's an alien."
And this is also a fascinating conceptualization of adolescence and the fact that we go through such huge changes, and a big part of becoming a teenager is the either breaking or dramatic shifting of the relationships that we held with people, including parents, siblings, friends, etc. As anyone who has a teenager in their life.
Yeah, basically teenagers are little shits. Talking to you. Yeah, you know who you are. You're a little shit. Because you're a teenager. And I'm generalising you, right? That means that all teenagers drink 2 fingers. And you know what? I'm going to do it with you. Because I'm a nice guy. All right? Nice guy. I'm going to drink it with you. Teenagers. That means anybody between the age of 13 and 19. Drink 2 fingers. Go.
Can remember being a teenager knows there is absolutely this sense of isolation that if you are a teenager, yeah, you feel like nobody understands you.
Anybody over the age of 19, drink 4 fingers. Thought you got away with it. Drink 4. Go.
And you feel awkward, you feel like you don't belong, and in some ways there's a longing for the time before you felt that way. And if you have a teenager in your life, I mean, even if you're an adult and understand what's going on, there's still this sadness, but it's expected. It is expected that when you hit puberty, which, yes, for boys hits a little later than girls, so it would be like 14, 15, or even 16, that when you hit that moment, that you're going to go through a dramatic personality shift. It all makes perfect sense that Steve and Jean don't see this as a totally strange thing because, yeah, our son's a teenager. And on some level, as Bug touches on brilliantly a couple times in her stories, they're probably relieved that his dramatic personality shift is just that he is a very dedicated volunteer.
Nah, something wrong. What do we know about the Yerks? They can play the part perfectly. And he does. The amount of times Jake says, it was such a typical Tom thing to do. There was no dramatic personality change. Do you know what, Fandalite Academy? You're wrong. You're wrong. And I'm calling you wrong because I'm going to get the viewers on this video to drink. And that's why you're wrong. Because I'm being nitpicky. 2 fingers, drink.
Whereas Jake, who is just starting to be a teenager himself, does not see this as something normal and does not conceptualize it as something that is supposed to happen, which I think is a totally legitimate reaction from a younger sibling. And again, one of the ways that children's books are fantastic in the way...
Surprised my fiance hasn't called yet. She said she would.
Do not expect it as adults do.
Quick note, just to add to what Kate said. So we know from the second to last book that Jake is 13 when the war starts. It's based on context clues that we can make an educated guess that Tom would be 15 or 16. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a very valid explanation for why we don't have a literal invasion of the body snatchers moment where, somebody goes, "You're not my real son."
But this is...
And, I mean, you can only conceive...
I mean, I've already had my drink for them being wrong here, but the Yerks were able to play the part perfectly, which is why they're able to... I mean, Chapman's a bad example because he was acting weird, but yeah, that's the thing I've never thought about Animorphs. We always get told they play the part perfectly, and everyone always fits in like they normally would. But then we get the examples of like Chapman, who just act really weird. Maybe that's because he was always under Vista 3's supervision, shall we say, and that affected his act, but... Yeah, the Yerks are supposed to be able to play the part perfectly. So this point, Fandalite Academy, is not valid. Not valid. You're wrong. And because of that, I'm going to finish my drink, which is 1 finger. So the rest of you drink 1 finger as well. Do it. Drink.
Solutions within your known realm, which I'm sure Bug has a much more psychologically sound way of stating, but basically it is never ever going to occur to someone unless they're already somebody who has alien conspiracy theories or is paranoid about that sort of thing, that the reason this person is acting so different is because they are actually not themselves anymore.
The other thing that this line where Axe is struggling to conceptualize of Elfangor's death and Jake says, yeah,
Oh, there she goes.
Messenger video.
Hello, Pebble.
My darling, I have some really bad news.
What's that?
I've been researching my family tree.
Go on.
I'm Welsh.
Fuck's sake. Fuck! Fucking...
I'm actually related to, the
No!
David Belch from like the 1500s, as far back as I've researched.
Defeated. Defeated and slain.
I love you.
I'm not sure I can love you anymore. The wedding's off. The wedding is off. You've betrayed me for the last time, wench.
Oh, my dearest.
And what's more annoying is that I now have to drink 2 extra fingers.
So, my
That's
dear,
all your fault.
technically, that makes you a commoner and me not a commoner.
I'm not a commoner. I am high-born. I know that because my mother told me so.
That what?
That I'm high-born.
Are you sure?
Well, she is North Korea. She is the North Korean dictator, so yeah, of course I'm high-born. 2 fingers for me. Drink.
Sorry, my dear. I thought that was exciting. I wanted to share it with you.
You are not part Welsh because you've not shagged any sheep, as far as I know. Are you going to let me finish this? I've only got like a few minutes left. I knew you'd call eventually. I didn't think it would take you so long.
I was engrossed in this research, my dear.
Well, you can tell me about it later and I'll probably cry myself to sleep.
Okay, I'm just gonna eat all these tacos.
Right, my dear. Talk to you in a bit. Love you. Goodbye.
Call you in a minute.
In a bit. Yeah, she will. Quick, get the episode done. Go, go, go.
Great literary parallel where the first book, obviously the plot hinges on Elfangor's death. A lot of the first act is getting them to that moment where they witness his death. His death then becomes the impetus for not only them becoming involved in the war in the first place, but specific impetus for their first battle, and is going to continue to motivate, as Kate said, Tobias especially, pretty much throughout the rest of the series. So that's the core event of the first book, is Elfangor's death. Arguably, the core event of the last book is Tom's death, where that is a lot of the motivation and a lot of the plot movement of the second to last book is setting up for his death.
Spoilers, by the
A lot of
way.
the echoes of the last book are of his death. Axe loses an older brother in the first book. Jake loses an older brother in the last book.
So I never thought of it like that. I never thought of it like that.
Parallel explicitly.
And I think part of what it is explicit, deliberate killing, because Rachel's death would really be probably the most significant moment.
Oh, agreed. Yes.
Of 53. But Jake and Rachel know that Rachel is likely going on a suicide mission, but it's not a guarantee, and she's going into it with a choice. Tom A has no choice, and B, Jake is deliberately, like I said, setting up his death. It's a choice that Jake and Rachel make. I think that's another way that it parallels. Just real quick, it's worth mentioning. So, like I said, I think this series...
By the way, Jake's character trait, leadership, making that decision, I'm going to count it as leadership, because you have to make hard decisions as a leader. And plus, we need to drink more, so 1 finger, drink.
undermines the traditional hero's journey in a lot of ways. And among other things, Jake does not achieve the one thing he wanted to achieve from the moment when he really understood what was going on here. He wants to save his brother. He does not do that by the end of the series. This is just one example of how she's undercutting this myth, this idea that you go out, you want something, you fight hard, you face obstacles, and then you achieve it. Well, real life doesn't work out that way, and
that's one of the great things about this series. One of the great things.
This kids series about blue centaurs fighting snails manages to have a more realistic portrayal of war than most war movies.
Something wrong. The Yerks look more like slugs than snails. Wrong. Fandalite Academy. 2 fingers. Drink. I'm being nitpicky, I know. Because I can. Drink.
About real wars.
I think that's about all we have for the message.
This has been the Fandalite Academy.
And that's my last finger, and that's your last finger. Drink.
source for all the psychological
For podcast name.
and literary theory behind Animorphs that you neither wanted nor needed.
The creators of this podcast would also like to thank The Sharing. Come for the barbecue and beach volleyball. Stay because you have no choice. Join up today!
That was fascinating. It really was. I wasn't joking when I said that's probably the favourite podcast I've listened to so far, the Fandalite Academy. If you enjoyed it, go to the link in the description and go follow them. It was fascinating. Just the amount of knowledge they had. They knew. The one thing they didn't know was that it was Marco who was almost killed by Axe when he mentioned Vista 3. But honestly, I reckon that was a slip of the tongue. So, the only criticism I have, is that this episode was meant to be about Book 4, and there was very little about Book 4. It was mostly bouncing around the rest of the series. But apart from that, fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Really good job, Bugs and Kates. Bug and Kates. Sorry. Yeah, brilliant. Right, I need the lav. My fiance's probably going to call me in a minute, and I cannot do another two fingers, because finish that drink, don't want to open another. Thank you very much for watching. That's been fascinating. And I shall see you next time. Ta-ra.